Gary Wills, Lincoln at Gettysburg, The Words That Remade America, by Nathan Miller. The Battle of Gettysburg took place in 1863, right outside the town of Gettysburg, home to a mere 2,500 residents at the time. The battle proved a turning point of the Civil War in retrospect. Before the battle, Confederate commander Robert E. Lee had concentrated his army around the town. The battle proved a failure for both sides, as many valuable opportunities had been lost. Lee lost troops by the tens of thousands, whereas Union commander George Meade had let Lee escape. The battle itself led to over 50,000 casualties and remains America's bloodiest battle on U.S. soil. For 4 months later, many gathered at Gettysburg in order to dedicate a new cemetery for those that lost their lives in the battle. The ceremony was to be customary for that time, including music, prayer, and oration, as well as a dedication. Edward Everett, a famed orator, had been chosen as the highlight of the day in leading the oration, whereas Lincoln had only been casually invited as a general call of high political officials, as well as celebrities, and to only administer a few remarks. Lincoln soon took the opportunity, as he could, to use rhetoric in order to divine the objectives of the war. Contrary to traditional belief, Wills believes that Lincoln worked diligently in preparing his remarks for that day. Edward Everett, on the other hand, took over a month. Lincoln simply did not need Everett's research of the battle in developing his address, as he spoke of the power of democracy and the meaning of such a war, rather than the battle in specific. On November 19th, Lincoln uttered one of the most compelling orations in history, in which he distilled the essence of the Union cause and why the North must keep fighting.
"Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Lincoln read these words aloud merely months after the battle itself, contrary to Everett, who had recited his speech from memory. In only 10 sentences, Lincoln delivered one of the most powerful speeches ever given. Myth tells of a photographer who did not get to take Lincoln's picture, as he believed he would be able to take his time. Everett stood in awe as he delivered the true Gettysburg Address. Everett's oration had been slated as the Gettysburg Address that day. In a letter to Lincoln after the ceremony, Everett said this: "I should be glad if I could flatter myself that I came as near the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes." In the book, Wills dispels the fact that the common impersonation of Lincoln at Gettysburg is done in a baritone voice, a somewhat heroic-sounding voice, whereas Lincoln had a high tenor voice, giving him great audibility. He also pointed out that Lincoln's work in acting allowed him to have great rhythmic delivery and meaningful inflection. Lincoln did not only present the Declaration of Independence in a new light as a matter of founding law, but put its central proposition, equality, in a newly favored position as a principle of the Constitution. What had been mere theory in the writings of James Wilson, Joseph Story, and Daniel Webster, that the nation preceded the states in time and importance, now became a livid reality of the American tradition. The results of this were seen almost at once. Lincoln expressed in his acts as well as his words, making Union not a mystical hope, but a constitutional reality. When at the end of the address he referred to the government of the people, by the people, for the people, he was not like Theodore Parker, just praising popular government as a transcendentalist ideal. Rather, like Webster, he was saying that America was a people, accepting as its great assignment what was addressed in the Declaration. This people was conceived in 1776, was brought forth as an entity whose birth was datable 70 years before, and placeable on this continent, and was capable of receiving a new birth of freedom. Thus, Abraham Lincoln changed the way people thought about the Constitution. Lincoln was the president of a single nation. The rebellion had changed his responsibilities. The rule-book for that nation was the Constitution, and under it, as president, he had to countenance slavery where it existed and could only end it under that document war power. He had entered the process of eradicating slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, but when he got to Gettysburg, he carefully failed to mention emancipation, or for that matter, the Union, the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence. Instead, with one brief quotation, he made the Declaration the nation's founding document, drawing on his own powerful analysis of Jefferson's work. Inventing America, Wills declares that Lincoln achieved a revolution in thought. Lincoln changed the Constitution from within by appeal from its letter to the spirit. The Gettysburg Address has become an authoritative expression of the American spirit, as authoritative as the Declaration itself, and perhaps even more influential, since it actually determines how we read the Declaration. For most people now, the Declaration means what Lincoln told us it means, as he did to correct the Constitution without overthrowing it. By accepting the Gettysburg Address and its concept of a single people we dedicated to a proposition, we have been changed. Because of it, we live in a different America. PBS has made a TV episode in which they describe the impact of Gettysburg on the Civil War and American history. In this next short clip, they describe his speech.
Lincoln takes his place on the platform among the dignitaries. A head taller than most men, the crowd of nearly 20,000 greets him with curiosity and awe. But Lincoln is not the most anticipated speaker on the platform. That honor falls to Edward Everett, the most popular orator, the most inspirational speaker of his time. Typical for the day, he speaks for 2 hours.
Everett spoke for a long time about the history of the battle, and this was what people expected in those days. There was no television, there was not a lot of books around, there was no internet. People wanted to hear the narration of their times through these big speeches to a huge crowd.
Finally, it is Lincoln's turn. Everett spoke from memory. Lincoln puts on his reading glasses. The Gettysburg Address will barely last 3 minutes, 10 sentences. A mere 272 words. When the president looks up from his paper, the crowd stands silent. Is the speech over? Is there more? The photographer charged with documenting the ceremony believes he has plenty of time to get a picture of the historic moment. He is still fumbling with his equipment when Lincoln speaks his last word. The only photograph of the president at the ceremony captures him among the crowd. Finally, the president hears a long, thunderous applause. Now history will take the measure of the president's remarks.